elevating the discussion while talking about the things that matter most. You're listening to Society and the State, Life, Liberty, and Your Pursuit of Happiness. Now, your hosts, Connor Boyack and Brian Hyde.
Hey everyone, Connor here with my co-host Brian and a very interesting guest for a discussion that I think you're going to find very interesting because it's so rare. We're joined today by Eric Moutsos, a former police officer who has had some viral posts on Facebook very recently discussing the issue of quotas and his experience with the administration and his law enforcement agency requiring him to go out and be arresting and citing people. Eric, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Connor.
So let's maybe start by talking about what your post said, because I didn't initially see your post. It was actually my wife, who is not very political. She's not friends with very political people at all. But into her newsfeed one day came a share of your first post in this series of posts that you've done that has gotten a lot of traction. Tell us a little bit about this issue of quotas that you've been discussing, and then a little bit later we can get into why you've decided to speak out about it.
Yeah, I've kind of been planning on doing this for a while now, and then when I saw that arrest with Nurse Wubbles, it really pushed me to say something, because I feel like there's a deeper problem in a lot of these organizations that a lot of people around the country right now, they're screaming racism all over the place, saying that this is, it's worse than the 60s in a lot of ways, that police officers are racist. They want to stop us. And the whole time I've just been thinking, like, I have got to tell my real story. I got to tell where it began. And so I posted this, and I posted this kind of about, it wasn't my story necessarily. I'm not sure how familiar your audience is with my story.
Not at all, Eric.
What happened when I finally left, and I don't really want to get into that part, because it's but ultimately my badge and gun was taken for discrimination, because I didn't want to lead the Utah Gay Pride Parade. Mm-hmm. When I was a police officer, when I was a motorcycle cop, they wanted me to be in the parade as a participant, and I asked them for a trade of assignments. And when I got a trade with another cop, they took my badge and my gun discrimination, because they felt like, just by, I guess, thinking or saying that I didn't want to be a participant in the parade, it was terms for discrimination. So, but going back, what the public doesn't know is that I was passed up for 2 positions before joining the motorcycle squad in 2013. When I was on the bicycle squad, I was ordered to arrest 5 people per day as part of a quota. And it wasn't just traffic tickets. It was 5 misdemeanor arrests. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I have got to say something about this. I've got to say something. And so finally, when the sergeant sat us down and said, "This is the order," I told my sergeant no. And it was a huge backlash, because you just don't do that, especially kind of in a paramilitary organization. You just do not say no to your supervisor without having major consequences. And so he dismissed us that day to go out and work. And so when we came back, he started counting the tickets. So there was probably, 5 or 6 of us on the squad. And he starts counting, each person's tickets. So one person had 5, one person had 6, one person had 5. And then he got to me and he counted 1, 2, 3. And he looked up at me and I just looked at him. And it was like, I just knew there was going to be big problems. And so he pulled me out in the hallway. He screamed at me. He said things that just, to me, that were extremely disconcerting. They were hurtful, and he ordered me to stay after shift another hour to arrest 2 more people, overtime, which I didn't get paid for, which was pretty weird. But I wouldn't do it. And so at that point, I told my sergeant that I was not going to continue. I was not going to arrest the next two people. It got very, very uncomfortable because I stayed after an hour after shift. All of my partners went home, and I basically sat kitty corner at 1 something in the morning. I don't know what time it was. It was really early in the morning.
Wow.
And there was nobody out. And so now basically I told my sergeant, I said, what if there's nobody to arrest? What if we come to the end of shift and there's nobody to arrest? And then it just further validated my point when I was asking him these questions. I said, what if the citizens of Salt Lake City knew that we had an actual quota? And so
did he respond to that?
Yeah, he didn't care. He just said he disagrees with me. He just said, there's enough people breaking the law that 5 people is nothing. Like that's not a big number. Anyway, my name started to get tarnished within the police department. Like I went for several positions, and all of a sudden I wasn't getting picked up. And I had never been to IA, so I had never had anything wrong with my record. And in fact, they never put this on my, they never wrote me up for it. Well, why didn't they write me up for it? Because I don't think they wanted it documented that I had told them no. But I was now facing consequences from all over the department for what I said to him.
Eric, what is the danger in sending police officers out and essentially telling them, look, whether you see anybody breaking the law or not, find the people to either ticket or arrest? What's the danger in a policy like that?
Well, the danger is what you're seeing. You're seeing this divide in our country right now. You're seeing officers when they pull you. If you're getting pulled over, especially by a motorcycle officer or a traffic cop or like UHP, there's no talking anybody out of anything usually because they have got to hit their numbers before the end of shift, and that's why I want this conversation to happen so badly because I want to just scream at the top of my lungs. This is the problem. Like it's not that cops are going out trying to pick on people. It's that they have to.
Eric,
and
one thing I wonder though in response to your story is that perhaps critics will dismiss it as a regional or a localized problem. Like, oh, that's just your agency, but I know the police officers in my agency or my neighbor's a cop, he's a good guy, et cetera, et cetera. What's your perception or understanding of how widespread this problem of quotas is within the law enforcement community more generally?
It just depends on what squad you're in. Like with Salt Lake City, if you're in regular patrol and you don't play this game, because it's it's a game. Like if you want to get promoted within Salt Lake City, you have to have a specific, you have to have stats, and you have to have a lot of stats. You have to have a lot of on-view activity, meaning you see and then you see and stop, right? And so I don't know. I don't know what agencies are what, because I only have the experiences that I have, but I believe that it's a lot worse than we think. And the reason why, it's like when you see a cop plants drugs on person, why would a cop plant drugs on somebody unless they were trying to hit their numbers? Like what would be the purpose of doing that? And so I think it depends on what sergeant it is. It depends on if they're playing the game to try to get looked at or promoted. And it depends on if they're, because some officers, they don't play the game, and so they're stuck in patrol their whole careers, and they're considered lazy. And then some officers, it's just, which I got into is just, try to find as much on-view activity as you can so that when you go to promote, you've now, you now have the stats to show, hey, look, I'm a hard worker.
Eric, on the question of it being, regionalized or localized or whatever, you did post a recent story about Florida, right? There was an incident in Florida where an official resigned. Tell us a little bit about what happened there.
Well, they had called them out saying, hey, there's you guys have quotas. And from what I read, this guy said, no, we don't. But then emails started to leak out that said, yeah, you do. And here's the emails. And so then he resigned. And so there's some states that actually have the laws that say no quotas. And then there's states like ours that are just kind of, we don't know, what is it? What is the law? I mean, it's definitely unconstitutional. But most people, and especially the police officers that I've talked to, just under, just kind of low key, they know this is a problem. They know it's a huge problem, and but nobody dares to say anything because, especially when you're working. I mean, when you're working paycheck to paycheck, you just go with it, man. Because
you don't want to jeopardize your paycheck.
Yeah, and your pension. I mean, it's like. And so that's what I see as a huge problem. So I would love to see laws that are shaped, that you can't, let's say money, generated from citations, like it can't go into a general fund. It's their money, or how could I explain this? I think laws need to change that you cannot promote or advance anybody's career based on stats or you can't even look at somebody's stats when you're going to promote them.
I want to say, Eric, real quick for our listeners, that Florida story is very interesting, and we're going to link to it on today's show notes page, which is societyandthestate.com/31.
And Eric, I wanted to follow up with this. I know that many agencies say that this isn't a quota, this is a performance measurement practice. And I have friends in law enforcement, particularly in southern Utah, who have run into this. What other metrics could be used to measure an officer's performance as to, whether he or she are doing their job like they're supposed to, besides tickets and arrests?
Well, look, we were supposed to be peace officers, right? Not police officers. We're supposed to be peace officers. So why don't we do real quotas on, like, hey, how many high fives did you give to a kid between the ages of, 8 and 15 before they hate your guts?
Right.
Why don't we do how many business checks? Hey, this is Officer Moutsos. I just wanted to check in and say, how are you doing? Why don't we, if it's all about getting cops working, then why don't we look at like the things that we can do to help the community versus put them down? And so I'm really every day I'm more passionate about this, and it's going to be, I don't know why people haven't opened their eyes to this. Maybe it's just time. Maybe it's finally time for people to say, hey, look, we need to address this, because ultimately what I believe, it goes down to the money, and it goes down to the money deep within departments, within the justice system, the prison systems, the judges, the prosecution. They've got to hit their numbers too.
Eric, is it possible that the reluctance to look closer at policies like this stems from there's a tendency in society to I don't know if I'll use the word worship, but certainly we put people in law enforcement up on a pedestal. And when someone questions practices or they question policies, it's not a small group of people, both within and out of law enforcement, who look at that as, hey, you're attacking the police.
Yeah, it's really weird, because we've got to have an honest conversation. Like if we're supposed to be the ones with the uniform that have the most integrity in our society, well, then let's talk about it. Let's talk about integrity. Let's talk about the actual reason why we stopped those people. Because you can stop, like if you were a police officer and you followed somebody for long enough, you're going to stop them. Like they're going to break the law somewhere. Every day, everybody breaks the law somewhere, especially on the road. And so when I was on the motorcycle squad, I had to write 20 tickets a day or get 2 DUI arrests per night. And that's huge numbers, and that's a lot of money. And then on top of it, we were incentivized. Every arrest that we made, DUI arrest, we would get 1 hour off under the radar. And so I think I don't know how that's not against the law.
That's very interesting. Eric, one thing that Brian said struck me, and I want to ask you a little bit more directly. That whenever there's criticisms of the law enforcement system, especially the administration, which is more what you're talking about, these policies that the line officers and so forth have to go obey and implement. And like you said, if they're paycheck to paycheck, they just silently obey because, they got to preserve their, putting food on the table for their kids type of situation. So when people on the outside criticize the system or propose reforms, I think it's very easy for the critics to come at them. But you're different, right? Because you're a former police officer. You're part of the, this brotherhood and so forth. What has been the response to you? Have you faced similar criticism like that now that you're kind of on the other side sharing your criticisms openly, or has it been a different experience since you know these people and you're friends with many of them?
I want to publicly apologize to you and your group because I've actually sent a few zingers towards your institute because I saw a couple videos that looked anti-police, right? And so then I got defensive, thinking, man, these guys are just against the cops. And when I spoke out and I said those things, and the backlash that I got, it hit me so hard. Like, look, you're just trying to start the conversation. You're trying to get things that are changed for the good of the public, and that's what I'm trying to do. And so it was a big eye opener for me because a lot of police officers are upset at me right now. A lot of my friends, they don't understand what I'm doing. They think that I'm just trying to get attention. And I'm like, no, you guys, like this is a true problem that we have. Mm. And it's only going to get worse. Like if we do not have honest conversations and we do not have laws that are passed to that are actually going to protect you as a police officer, then we're going to have a huge divide between people. I mean, look at what's happening in the NFL right now. And it's all over this police brutality thing. And it's like, oh my gosh, we've got to talk about what I believe the problem is. And it's numbers, it's statistics, it's quota. And so I don't believe it's racism. I believe it's quotaism.
Eric, as we conclude here, you've shared a little bit throughout, but I want to give you the opportunity to be a little bit more concise here. What are your motivations? You've talked about wanting to start a conversation, but do your goals go beyond that? What would you like to see result from you speaking out openly about your experience with these quotas?
I would like to see laws passed. I would like to educate lawmakers in this state particularly, because you can only start where you're at, right? I would like to see laws passed that says, language like, you cannot, as a supervisor, promote or advance anyone's careers based on their statistics. I would like to see quotas completely taken off. Like you can't pressure officers to arrest people because discretion goes out the window. I'm in the process of writing a book right now. I'm almost done with it. I want to share my experience in book form. It's not done yet, but I really, so it's not only the conversation, but I hope to shape law, what I think needs to change because it's not going away.
Eric, thank you so much for joining us. For our listeners, we're going to link to the articles we mentioned, including your first Facebook post that kind of kicked this discussion off on today's show notes page, which is societyandthestate.com/31. And Eric, I've told you offline, we're very interested in working with you to see those laws change. But then I think the potential here is much more broad, right? Because if we can get it done in Utah, we can be an example for other states. We can try and get some model policy that hopefully others will follow. So thanks again for starting.
I'd love it. Man.
Thanks again for starting the conversation and for being with us today.
You've been listening to Society and the State. For show notes, archives, and more great content, visit societyandthestate.com.